Hi, how are you both?
Good. How
Good.
are
How are
you?
you?
Good, thanks.
We're going to
So
talk in tandem. We're going to talk over each other at the same time,
Perfectly, though,
Brendan
but
and
like
I. Yeah.
perfectly synced in tandem.
it's always the same with these Zoom rooms where you've got, multiple people in one. But I will jump straight in with, at what point did you know it had to be an origin story for Gizmo and the Mogwai?
It was one of the things early on when we started talking to Amblin and Warner Brothers. They really encouraged us to delve into Mogwai mythology. And so that was one of the most fun things about the writers' room. There was a lot of fun in the writers' room, but being able to kind of explain and expand upon the world that Joe and Amblin and Warner Brothers had built in the original movies was really a joy.
Did it make it a little bit easier being a prequel rather than trying to develop on what Joe had managed to do with the first two movies?
Yes, incredibly so. And especially, I mean, Joe himself describes Gremlins 2 as sequel proof, because it really is. I mean, how do you get bigger than that? So it was much easier for us to go back in time, because I think there's so much hinted at and left kind of in the margins in those opening moments of the original film of like Mr. Wing and stepping into his curiosity shop. There's so much there to take in that you could use as inspiration to jump off of. And how did him and Gizmo meet? What is their relationship? So it's just a lot more to explore.
When did you know it was going to be Mr. Wing, and having him as a young boy save the day, pretty much? When was it him and not someone else to then leap into him eventually?
Oh, sorry, you mean Mr. Wing when did we know that we wanted to do a prequel with Mr. Wing?
Yes. When did you decide it had to be Mr. Wing and not someone else to then lead into Mr. Wing?
Got it. I think Mr. Wing was always meant to be the star from the very beginning, and setting it in early 1900s China. And the idea was to really tell a story about the origin of that friendship. And also, there's obviously a lot of other friends that they pick up along the way. But yeah, I think Mr. Wing was always involved.
And you have this beautiful balance of respecting culture but also, keeping the storytelling alive. Did it help having such a great writers' room for that? How did you go about getting that balance there?
It's those early days in the writers' room were really great in that we're all fans. Brendan and I both watched Gremlins when we were way too young and loved it, and was also traumatized by it. And I think that's probably true of every writer that was in the writers' room, and a lot of the crew, and certainly a lot of the cast as well. And to have that level of just like fandom in the creative process was just so helpful, in that we knew that we wanted this to be a co-viewing show that parents, kids, teens, the whole family can watch together. And we really wanted to have something that would appeal to existing fans like us, but also bring in new fans of the franchise, which is why we have so many Easter eggs and so many kind of winks to the original movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it helped. I mean, the original films are such a great kind of guide on how to balance tones, how to balance kind of like epic adventure type of moments with genuinely scary horror moments with laugh out loud comedy. So, Joe Dante gave us those kind of great touchstones to work off of, and thankfully our writers, our storyboard artists, really, just kind of found that balancing act themselves for our series.
And you have such a predominantly Asian American cast. Was that very important to you going in, based on the fact that we're going into 1900s China?
Yeah, I think that 10 years ago, even if even if it was an Asian story, Asian American story, there were Asians in front of the camera. Sometimes there weren't Asian creators behind the camera, and we're really proud of the fact that we have a lot of Asian Americans on the crew, and especially this voice cast. I mean, this voice cast are people that Brendan and I have been fans of for such a long time, and I think in almost every case, everybody was our first choices said yes, which was such a joy. And in terms of the cast, there are such a span. You really can see like almost the entirety of like Asian Americans on film from beginnings to now. And that, James Hong, when he came to the recording booth, one of the first things he talked about was how one of his first jobs, or maybe it's his first job, he acted across from Clark Gable. And so you have, James Hong acting across from like a 10 or 11-year-old kid, and who's also, following in James's footsteps. And then there's everybody in between, BD Wong and Ming-Na Wen. And it was really a joy to put this together and have these actors bring the characters to life.
My 10-year-old is so happy that you've got Mulan there.
We're like a full Mulan reunion. Yeah, it's amazing. Love it.
Well, at what point did you know Joe Dante had to come in to this as a consulting producer? Was it from the very beginning that you were like, yes, we need your expertise?
It was really from the beginning. And, Joe came in and spoke to the creative team very early on in the process, and just to get his blessing on something that really was his baby. Like I think it was really inspiring for us. We were all inspired by not just Gremlins, but his other movies. And to know that he believed in the project was really valuable to us.
Yeah. And it was amazing for all of us to be able to pick his brain and kind of get it like, is there anything that you ever wanted to do Gremlins and you never got a chance to? How did you guys get the most out of Gizmo? Things like that. And it's just, he had great answers for everything. And it really kind of became, again, kind of like guiding lights for us to follow.
And then you've got Zach Galligan coming back as well, but not as Billy. When did you decide that you'd want him to come back in? And how did you decide his character?
We just wanted Zach back any way we could. We wanted to bring back as much, again, being fans ourselves, we wanted to bring as much of the original cast of both films into the show any way we could. So we were always looking for opportunities. So whenever there was a role where it's like, actually, I think so-and-so could have fun with this. And Zach being probably number one on that list of like, when you think Gremlins after Gizmo and Stripe, you think Billy. So it's like wanting to find some way to work with Zach. And the character we found for him was just one of, as this guy kept being, for me, it was like him being on the abused end of Gremlins. Even if he's not directly a blood relative of Billy, there's a nice linkage there for Zach between the roles of like the guy who's constantly going to be most impacted by them.
And just as my last question, why animation? Did that help with the actual storytelling rather than getting puppets back in or CGI or anything like that? Was animation a bit easier?
It felt to us like it was the right place for it. And that, if you're doing 1920s China and every episode is in a different location, you have hundreds of monsters and creatures and spirits from Chinese mythology. And being able to tell this story in animation, I think we felt like we were kind of unrestricted to a certain degree. And it just, looking at the original movies and then trying to replicate that kind of, if not the exact look of it, but the feeling of it, animation really felt like the right place for this particular project.
Yeah, and we felt reassured by that choice when one of the first things Joe Dante said upon hearing it's anime is like, animation's perfect for it. You don't have to worry about the puppets.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I cannot wait for people to see this because as a fan of the movies, it's so brilliantly done and I love the origin story.
Oh, thank you so much.
Really glad you dug it. Thank you.
Thanks.